Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second shelf and to another Chatty Check-in. I did the first video of this kind, I did videos of this kind quite a while back ago, but I restarted this chatty videos last month in October, and you seem to enjoy it, so I'm going to make it a regular feature and just have once every month or so just a sit down and a chatty check-in about, writing and reading and books and life and stuff. Anyway, first writing. I talked a little bit I write books also. I published a couple of books. So last time I talked a little bit about writing, and you seem to be interested. And one of the questions that came popping up repeatedly was how do you start? How do you come up with an idea for a book? And I'm talking about fiction here because nonfiction is different, and I write nonfiction as well. So if you want me to talk about that, I will. But for now, novels. And I think it's of course different for every author how he or she starts a book or how a book comes about. But for me, it always starts with something concrete, a scene or an idea that without thinking about it pops up, and then I start thinking about it and think, oh, that's maybe. I give you an example. The book that I'm currently working on, the novel I'm working on, that is the second revisions, are almost finished. I wanted to write a new novel, but I'm not sitting down at my desk thinking about what kind of novel I can write. So I was giving a talk somewhere and coming back to Amsterdam around 10 o'clock or something. And I was really hungry, so I went to this little pizza place to take a takeaway place to get a pizza. And the place is normally packed. It was completely empty. There was nobody in there. The street was really empty as well. And I joked with the waitress while waiting for my pizza, like maybe something has happened. I don't know, some disaster, because it's really strange. And she, acknowledged that she hadn't had an empty house like this in months. So home I went with my pizza, and then I thought, well, missing people, missing stuff all of a sudden disappearing, that's an interesting theme. So I started thinking about missing, and then the book developed from this original idea about missing people. It morphed over the next couple of weeks into a book about missing art, about truthfulness, about art. So it's if you look at the original idea, and if you look at the finished product, the book, it almost seems as if they have nothing to do with each other. But that's how most of the time it works for me. Just something that strikes me, something that pops up, and from there it develops, and often into something completely different. And then I start, outlining, and I start to think of characters who could be in this story, who could tell this story, and then it evolves from there. A lot of writers I know, they start with characters. They have this idea of a certain person in their mind, and then they develop a story around that person. For me, it's the other way around. It always starts with an idea about a certain topic or a scene that is a symbol for a certain topic. And once I know what the story will be, then only then I start to think about characters. Anyway, that's the chatty stuff about writing. And please, if you want to know more, leave me preferably specific questions. Then I can try to answer them. This is also a chatty check-in about reading, and recently I watched a couple of videos dealing with the question whether people read multiple books at the same time. I think Lukash started this discussion on BookTube with his video about being a bookish polygamist. I leave a link to his video down below, and then Sean picked up this idea and gave it his own spin, calling himself a book slut because he always reads multiple books at the same time. That's really interesting. If you haven't watched either of those videos, you definitely should. And that, started me thinking about whether how I read. And I would say before BookTube, I was a monogamist, at least bookish monogamist. So I would start a book and I would sit down and read it either in one sitting. I'm like a hoover, hoovering down books when I'm engaged, or two sittings, but I would start a book, I would finish the book, and then I would start the next book. That changed quite significantly for me once I started doing BookTube, and not so much because of the videos I do, but because of the buddy reads. I think buddy reads are fantastic, and it's one of the perks of BookTube that you quote unquote meet people outside of BookTubes and that you read books together, either just with one person or sometimes with a group. And I love that this exchange of ideas about books. I think it's fantastic. Sometimes I do too many, but that's a different topic. We'll talk about that a little later. But anyway, so with buddy reads, you choose a book and then you have a certain schedule, like if it's a 300 page book, you read 50 pages a week and then you check in and then you read them. That is normally not the pace in which I read a book. So when I do buddy reads, I always have at least one book that I just read for myself in the pace that I determine myself. And if the buddy read is like currently, if I have two buddy reads non-fiction, then I need something, a fiction book, and oftentimes something easy that I can read on the side. I don't think personally that there is the right way to do it, whether to read one book and then from start to finish and then the next, or whether to read multiple books. And I think there are arguments for both. I really liked Sean's argument that he made in his video, that the fact that he reads multiple books at the same time, also meaning that it takes him longer to finish one particular book, and that this the fact that it takes him longer also for him deepens the reading experience, that he remembers books better because he takes more time with them. And I think that that's certainly something that resonates with me, because I'm, like I said, I'm a hoover when it comes to reading, except for buddy reads. And oftentimes I can't remember the names of characters very well. I remember the gist of a book, but I have difficulties remember names and places and even a bit particulars or details of a story. And that certainly comes also from the fact that I read it too fast, that I just want to take it all in, and I have to reread books in order to slow myself down and take it in more deeply. So as I said, I think there are pros and cons for each of the two variations of reading, and I'm of course interested whether when you read, whether you prefer reading just one book from start to finish and then on to the next, or whether you prefer reading multiple books. I think it's a really fascinating topic. And what I said earlier, sometimes I do too many buddy reads because I'm so excited when somebody asks me, do you want to buddy read this or that? And I realized that I can do buddy reads, one after the other. But if I have a buddy reads parallel going on, it's not good for me to have more than 2 or 3 at the most, because I need space to just read a book that comes up, that a spontaneous read. And if I don't have that space in a month, or in a week, or in 2 weeks, that doesn't bring me joy. That's the condo advice, I guess. So I try now to limit myself, to limit the amount of buddy reads, so that I will always have enough reading time left that I can just fill spontaneously with the books that with a book that I want to read, and in the pace I want to read it in. And speaking of reading, it's of course Nonfiction November. I guess a lot of you participate in this event, which has been organized, I think, for 5 years now, by Olive from a book Olive. If you are interested and haven't heard about it, I leave a link to her announcement video down below. And the idea behind it is just to get people to read more nonfiction in November. If you never read nonfiction, just read 1 book. If you read 2 books, then try to read 3 books. And Olive always comes up with a couple of prompts that are interpretable in many ways. And I always like that idea, because people twist and turn these prompts to suit their own reading taste, and I love it. So the prompts for this time are design, sport, true, and voice. And I just started a buddy read with Lukash, whom I mentioned earlier. For me, it's for the prompt design. It's about religion. Karen Armstrong's book, The Battle for God. It's about fundamentalism. So I think it's about the big religious designs. That's how I interpret it. I chose to interpret design. Karen Armstrong is a British scholar of comparative religion. I think she's a fascinating, intelligent, wonderful woman, and her books are written for a popular audience. So, she writes books, scientific books as well, but these kind of books are for a general audience. So, like I said, I just started. It's Wednesday today, so we started on Monday, and we will read 3 chapters or something every week. It's a 400 or 500 page book, depending on the edition, and I find that subject fascinating. So I'm really into reading this book, and of course I will talk about the book once I've finished it. And I'm not sure yet which book I will pick up on the side, but it will most certainly be fiction, and it will probably be something light. I just finished one of these reads, a site that I picked for myself, Maria Hummel, Still Lives, sort of a detective in the art world, which I quite enjoyed, but I've just finished that, so I don't know yet. But it will most likely be another detective or a sci-fi, just to to have this balance between this heavy stuff of the nonfiction that I'm reading, because I'm reading also some other nonfiction books, Darwin's On the Origin of Species, because Steve Donahue hosts a read-along, and I'm reading a biography of the Pankhurst family with Sean, so that they are all, the topics, not heavy. It's not heavy reading, but you know what I mean. So I need something light that I can read fast and finish fast, but I'm not sure yet which one. You will hear about that in one of the recent reads when I talk about the books that I have read. So anyway, this was my chatty check-in for the month of November. I hope you've enjoyed this second one as well, and thank you very much for watching. And I'm interested, of course, in whether you participate in Nonfiction November, that's for sure, but I'm also interested in, questions that you might have, stuff that you want me to talk about. that would be lovely. And any other comment, of course, I'm looking forward to that. And I'll see you all soon in the next one. Bye bye.